So, as some of you guys may know, the Starfinder 2E field test number 3 just came out. So, I did cover the Android in a stream last Friday, but I had some problems, so I never did get to the Vesk. So that's what I'm going to be covering today. Let's dive in. So the Vesk is a medium-sized creature with 10 ancestry hit points. Vesk have a speed of 20 feet, which is pretty interesting. I don't think this is going to be a huge problem in Starfinder since everything is ranged there. But if you're playing this ancestry in Pathfinder 2e, then you might have some issues depending on your class. The ability boosts for Vesk are Strength, Constitution free, and then an ability flaw in Wisdom. So you probably do not want to play a Mystic with this ancestry, or any other Wisdom-based class. For languages, they get Common and Vesk, as well as the standard languages equal to their Intelligence modifier. And Vesk also have Low Light Vision. There are 6 Vesk heritages to choose from. First, we've got the Brisk Wander Vesk, which increases your speed by 5 feet. Next up is the Night Stalker Vesk, which means you have dark vision. The Plated Vesk makes your scales medium armor. This armor has an item bonus of +4, a dex cap of +1, a check penalty of -2, and a strength threshold of +3. It also has the Comfort trait. If you have this heritage, you cannot wear other armor, but you can wear a flight suit. You can etch armor runes onto your scales, but you can't install armor upgrades. Taking the Venom Thought Vesk heritage allows you to cast Daze as an innate occult spell at will. This functions just like other cantrips in Pathfinder 2nd edition. In addition, you also gain a +1 bonus to occultism checks to recall knowledge about psychic traditions and other psychic stuff. Most of the heritages we've covered so far are actually pretty basic, but Daze is actually a decent cantrip, so this one is actually pretty good. The Warblood Vesk heritage gives you the Brutal Anatomy feat twice. But don't worry, I will cover as soon as I get to first level feats. And finally, the Wavecrest Vesk gives you a swim speed of 20 feet, as well as the Amphibious trait. However, this also decreases your land speed by 5 feet. Again, Starfinder is all about ranged attacks, so I don't think the speed decrease is really going to hurt the Wavecrest all that much. However, a 20-foot swim speed could definitely come in handy. For first level feats, first we have Armor Ace. This gives any armor you wear the Bulwark traits. If you don't know, Bulwark essentially allows you to add +3 instead of your Dexterity modifier on reflex saves against damaging effects. So things like a Fireball spell. Also, if you're wearing armor that already has the Bulwark trait, then this bonus increases to +4. Also, a Plated Vesk scales count as armor for the purposes of this feat. Next up we have Bathe in Blood. This gives you a +1 bonus to any damage you deal via persistent bleed damage. In addition, you can spend 1 action to roll a DC 10 flat check to remove any persistent bleed damage you have. So basically, you deal more persistent bleed damage, and if you get persistent bleed damage, you can just spend an action to roll a check to end it. Which, if you are playing a build that's based on bleed damage, this is an awesome feat. But other than that, it's pretty situational. Now it's time to talk about that Brutal Anatomy feat I talked about earlier. You gain one of the following unarmed attacks. A Claw attack that deals 1d6 slashing damage and has the Agile, Finesse, Unarmed, and Vesk traits. A Jaws unarmed attack that deals 1d6 piercing damage and has the Grapple, Unarmed, and Vesk traits. And a Trip unarmed attack that deals 1d6 bludgeoning damage and has the Sweep, Trip, Unarmed, and Vesk traits. Also, once you reach 5th level, you get the critical specialization effects with these attacks. Which the critical specialization effect for Unarmed is that they must make a Fortitude saving throw or be slowed 1 until the end of your next turn. Remember, guys, that if you're a Warblood Vesk, you can pick up this feat twice. meaning you could very easily get all 3 of these unarmed attacks. However, I think the best ones are the jaws and the tail, because those allow you to get item bonuses on your athletics skill actions. The claws just let you hit more, which is okay, but still. Anyway, moving on, next we have Fearless. This essentially gives you the Fighter's Bravery class feature, except without the reducing the frightened condition by 1. So auto crit successes against fear effects. And you don't get expert in will saves either. But hey, this is still pretty good. Next up, Menacing Snarl. As a free action, when you frighten a creature, you can increase their frightened condition by 1. You can use this feat once per hour, so effectively once per combat at most, depending on your game, of course. And finally, for level 1, we've got Vesk Weapon Familiarity. Just your standard weapon familiarity feats. Doshkos seem to be the standard Vesk weapon. They sound awesome, but I have no idea what kind of weapon they are. For 5th level, we have Blood Sense. You gain Blood Sense as an imprecise sense out to a range of 30 feet. This means you can use your sense of smell to detect creatures that aren't at full hit points, though it's still concealed to you unless you can actually see it. Creatures that don't have blood cannot be detected by this. So this doesn't work on constructs and oozes. However, this is an awesome way of tracking down enemies that are trying to sneak away from you after combat. As if they're within 30 feet of you, you know they're around somewhere. Next we have an awesome feat called Command Tactics. If an ally selects you as the target for their Follow the Expert, increase their circumstance bonus on their check by 1, or by 2 if you're a master in the skill they're trying to emulate. So that's plus 3 for Expert, plus 5 for Master, and plus 6 for Legendary. Follow the Expert is actually really useful outside of combat. So this is one you might want to pick up, especially if you're something like a Ruffian Rogue. Demoratosh's Claw requires a focus pool and for you to worship Demoratosh. Once per day, you can spend 1 action to regain a focus point, up to your usual maximum. This one is fantastic, especially if you don't have time to refocus. Next up we have Tear Wound, which requires Bathed in Blood. If you critically hit with a melee weapon, you can spend an additional action to deal 1d4 persistent bleed damage to your target. You deal 1d6 persistent bleed damage if you have the critical specialization effects for the weapon you use. You gain an item bonus to this persistent bleed damage equal to the weapon's tracking bonus, which I guess is similar to item bonuses? I'm not sure. And lastly, for level 5, we have Terrifying Bravado. If you critically succeed on a fear effect that came from a creature, or a creature fails or critically fails on a check to demoralize you, you can use a reaction to immediately attempt a demoralized check back at them. In other words, when a creature attempts to frighten you and fails, you get to frighten them right back. And it's a reaction, so you don't even have to attempt to demoralize them on your turn, making this feat really, really good. For level 9, we're going to start with Eager Combatant. If you roll Athletics or Intimidation for initiative, then you can use a free action to stride towards an enemy. Most of the time you are going to roll Perception for initiative, but if you can manage to roll Athletics or Intimidation, this is a fantastic feat. Just great action economy. One with the Night requires the Night Stalker Vesk Heritage. You gain Greater Dark Vision, allowing you to see through darkness you normally wouldn't be able to, such as that from a 4th level Darkness spell. Next, Opening Roar requires Expert in Intimidation. If you are aware of your foes and aren't trying to hide or sneak, you can use Intimidation for initiative, and you can use the result to demoralize one foe within range. If you have the Battle Cry feat, you can demoralize 2 foes with this feat. I'm assuming Frightened works the same in Starfinder 2e as it does in Pathfinder 2e. If that's the case, this is an awesome feat. You get to demoralize at least 1 foe immediately upon rolling initiative. And you can roll Intimidation for initiative which works really well with Eager Combatant. It's just a real shame that both those feats are the same level, but those two work amazingly together. Battlecry requires Master and Intimidation, so you may want to get that before picking up this feat. And finally, we have Plated Deflection, which takes either Armor Ace or the Plated Vesk Heritage. With this feat, you gain a once per day reaction. If a foe critically hits you, you can use this reaction to not take double damage from that hit, but still take any other effects. So things like critical specialization effects still apply. Because monsters in Pathfinder 2e, and I'm assuming Starfinder 2e, are so much stronger than you, you're gonna get critically hit eventually, no matter what class you pick. So this is gonna be useful no matter what type of character you're playing. Okay, for level 13, we've got Advantageous Assault. Note that this is different than the Advantageous Assault fighter feats. When you successfully strike a creature that has the Frightened condition or has persistent bleed damage with a melee or ranged weapon, it takes extra damage equal to the number of damage dice on that weapon. By the time you can take this feat, you should have a greater striking rune, which means that you do 3 extra damage whenever you hit someone with the Frightened or Persistent Bleed condition, which gives you a rather large incentive to make them frightened or give them persistent bleed damage, both of which are pretty great for the team, especially frightened. The Bloodletter feat requires the Tear Wounds feats, and of course that requires Bathed in Blood. But taking this feat means you can use Tear Wounds as a free action rather than a single action. It still requires a critical hit though, which means if you're playing something like a fighter, it's great. If not, it's too situational, just like Tear Wounds is. With Call Down the Saints, you can cast Spiritual Guardian as a 5th rank Divine Innate spell once a day. And at 15th level, you can cast it at 7th level. Spiritual Guardians is actually a fantastic spell. It is essentially a protector tree that can move and attack if you want it to, but you have to choose one or the other each round. It can either protect or it can attack, not both. The only problem I see is that this feat doesn't tell you how its attacks work if you're not a spellcaster. In fact, neither does the Spiritual Guardian spell. So they might have to say something about that in the playtest when it comes out. And lastly, for level 13, we have Overcome Shame. You can use this free action once per 10 minutes when you critically fail a strike against a foe with a melee or ranged weapon. The next time you attempt to hit that foe with the same weapon during that turn, you can roll twice and take the better results. However, if you still miss, then you become off guard until the end of your next turn. This is pretty situational. You'd want to use this after your first attack, because if you try to use it after your second attack, this would apply to your third attack. And you're just going to miss that, so off guard, which is not cool. And the chances of you critically failing on your first attack are pretty slim, especially if you're something like a fighter. Yeah, this is one I wouldn't pick up. We're almost done, but first we gotta talk about level 17 Ancestry feats. Starting with Battle Saint. You can cast Blessed Boundary and Divine Decree as once per day 7th level Divine Innate spells. Blessed Boundary is an awesome way of trapping enemies, as if they try to move through the boundary, they take damage, or if they touch it, or even if they just stay where they're at. It does provide cover, however, which makes it a little awkward. You can also use it to push enemies further into the sphere or towards your allies. Overall, great spell if you use it right. And Divine Decree can make the foe enfeebled, paralyzed, or even die. Thus, it is also a very good spell. If you get all the way up to level 17 with a Vesk, consider taking this feat. With Bolstered by Battle once per hour as a free action, if you deal a killing blow to an enemy, you can gain temporary hit points equal to your level. These temporary hit points last until the end of the current battle or 1 minute, whichever is shorter. This one is pretty situational, as you have to kill an enemy in order to use this feat. And the chances of that in a party of 4 are pretty slim. I wouldn't look at this feat when you get to level 17. Improved Blood Sense requires Blood Sense. Your Blood Sense gains a range of 60 feet and becomes a precise sense, but only against targets that have persistent bleed damage. This one is fantastic for any Vesk that focuses on persistent bleed damage. As if anybody has done persistent bleed damage to them, they are not hiding from a Vesk with this feat. And the last feat we got for the Vesk in this field test is Regenerative Blood. This requires the Wave-Crested Vesk Heritage. You can cast Regenerate as a 7th rank Primal Innate spell twice per day. Regenerate is a fantastic healing spell, as long as it's affected, they cannot die. Period. Although taking acid or fire damage deactivates it, so keep that in mind. The bottom line is, this is another great one to pick up if you get to 17th level. If you guys want to see more Starfinder 2e field test content, you can check out these videos here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.